The desert stretched before Gabriel like an endless bleached bone, its surface cracked and shimmering under a sun that seemed to have no mercy. 3 days had passed since he fled the university campus. 3 days of hitchhiking on dusty back roads, sleeping in abandoned barns, and surviving on stolen bread and warm water. His body was a map of bruises and scratches, his mind a fog of exhaustion and paranoia. But the photograph in his pocket, the one with his father's handwriting and the cryptic coordinates, kept him moving. The numbers led to a ghost town on the edge of a salt flat, a place that had been abandoned decades ago when the mining operations dried up. Gabriel walked through its empty streets, past collapsed roofs and boarded windows, until he reached the outskirts where a single structure remained intact, a low concrete bunker half buried in the sand, its entrance sealed by a rusted steel door. He knelt in front of it, brushing away the grit, and found a keypad embedded in the frame. He typed in the date of his father's death, 12/03/1994, and the door groaned open, releasing a rush of cool, stale air that smelled of dust and chemicals. Inside, the bunker was a time capsule, preserved exactly as it had been left. Rows of filing cabinets, a massive computer terminal from the 1990s, and a glass display case containing vials of what looked like blood samples. In the center of the room, a single projector sat on a metal table, and next to it, a stack of video cassettes labeled with the same handwriting he had seen on the photograph. Gabriel's hands trembled as he inserted the first cassette into the projector. The image flickered to life, revealing his father sitting in a small, dimly lit room, his face gaunt, but his eyes burning with the intensity of a man who had run out of time. If you are watching this, Gabriel, then you have found the archive. I am proud of you, but I am also terrified, because the truth I am about to tell you will change everything you believe about me, about your mother, and about the world we live in. Gabriel leaned forward, his heart pounding. I did not encode the committee list in your DNA to protect it. I encoded it because I had no other choice. The committee had already perfected a dormant biological agent, a virus that lies latent in the population, activated only by a specific genetic trigger. I discovered this in my final year of investigation. They do not just erase identities, they control bodies. The list of names you have been searching for is not a list of committee members. It is a list of activation keys, the DNA sequences that can activate the virus in specific populations. The professor is not trying to replace the committee. He is trying to acquire the master key, the sequence that can activate the virus globally, turning every living person into a puppet of his will. The list your mother gave you, it was a decoy designed to mislead anyone who came looking. The real key, the master sequence, is hidden in a place only you can find.
Gabriel felt the floor tilt beneath him, the weight of his father's words pressing down like a collapsing building. He had spent years chasing a conspiracy, but he had never imagined it could reach this magnitude. A weapon that could enslave humanity, and his father had been the one to discover it. He paused the tape and tried to steady his breathing, his mind racing through the implications. If the professor was after the master key, then the extraction team that had been hunting him was not trying to decode his DNA. They were trying to extract the location of the key from his memories using the chair in the archive. That was why the professor had offered him a deal, why he had been so patient. He did not need Gabriel's blood, he needed Gabriel's mind. The realization was a cold, clarifying shock. His mother, Elena, had known this. She had betrayed his father to the committee, but she had also spent 2 decades running from the professor because she knew that the professor was even more dangerous than the committee he had once served. The tape ended, and Gabriel sat in the silence of the bunker, his world collapsing and rebuilding itself in the span of seconds. His mother was not a collaborator. She was the key to a biological nightmare, and his father had hidden her in plain sight by creating a false narrative of betrayal. The gunshot at the lighthouse, the terrified look on her face, the way she had shoved the device into his hand and told him to run. It was not a betrayal. It was a final act of sacrifice to keep the professor from capturing her. But if the professor already knew she was the key, then why had he not taken her at the lighthouse? The answer was chilling. The professor did not need Elena alive. He needed her DNA, which could be extracted from any tissue sample, including the blood Gabriel had left on the floor of the bunker when he scraped his hands on the rusted door. He looked down at his palms, still raw and bleeding, and realized that he had just handed the professor the most dangerous weapon in existence. He had to warn her, but she was either dead or in captivity, and he had no way of knowing which. The bunker's computer terminal flickered to life, its screen displaying a single line of text. "Gabriel, I have been monitoring you. Do not try to find your mother. It is a trap. Come to me and I will give you the location of the real archive." The professor. Gabriel stared at the message, a cold fury building in his chest. The professor was taunting him, inviting him into a web that had been spun over decades. But Gabriel had no choice. He had to respond.
He typed a reply into the terminal. "If you have her, let her go. I will trade myself for her." The response came within seconds. "Your mother is alive, Gabriel, but she is not in my custody. She escaped the lighthouse before the extraction team arrived. She has been running for 20 years, and she is very, very good at it. I do not have her, but I know where she is going. She is heading to the same place you are, the source of the virus, the laboratory where your father first isolated it. She intends to destroy the sample, and with it, the only hope of controlling the virus that is already spreading through the population. You see, the committee did not just create a dormant agent, they released it decades ago. Every human on this planet carries it, and without the master sequence, they have no way to activate it. But if your mother destroys the sample, the virus becomes permanently inert, and so does the committee's power. They are panicking, and they are sending every asset they have to stop her. I can help you reach her first, but you have to trust me." Gabriel read the message twice, searching for the lie. The professor was a master manipulator, but the logic was undeniable. If the virus was already in the population, then the committee's power was absolute until someone found the master sequence and used it to activate the virus. The professor's offer was a poisoned chalice, but it was the only lead Gabriel had. He left the bunker, taking the tapes and a map he found in a filing cabinet, and began walking toward the coordinates the professor had provided, an old research facility in the mountains, a place his father had visited during his investigation. The journey took 2 days across jagged terrain and through freezing nights, but Gabriel did not stop. The professor was playing a long game, and Gabriel knew that the moment he reached the facility, the trap would spring. But he also knew that his mother was there, and that she had been running for too long. He found the facility at dusk, a cluster of concrete buildings half swallowed by the mountain, their windows dark and their entrances sealed. He approached cautiously, his senses heightened, but there was no sign of guards, no security cameras, nothing but the silence of the wind. He pushed open the main door and stepped into a corridor that smelled of antiseptic and decay. At the end of the corridor, a single light burned, and as he drew closer, he saw a figure standing in the doorway, her silhouette unmistakable. It was his mother, Elena, but she was not hiding. She was waiting for him, her face pale and her hands trembling. "You should not have come," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The professor knows you are here. He let you find me. He wants us both in the same place because the master sequence is not in my blood. It is in the combination of our 2 genetic codes. Your father designed it that way. He knew that the only way to protect the key was to split it between the people he trusted most. I am one half, you are the other. Together, we can activate the virus or destroy it. The choice is ours, but we have to make it before the professor arrives.
Gabriel stood frozen, his mother's words settling into his mind like shards of glass. His father had turned them both into living keys, and the professor had been herding them toward each other like animals in a pen. "How do we destroy it?" Gabriel asked, his voice hoarse. Elena shook her head. "I do not know. Your father left instructions, but I never found them. He was always 3 steps ahead, even when he was dying. He knew that I would be hunted, that you would be hunted, and that the only way to stop the professor was to give you the information you needed to finish the work." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. "I found this in the lighthouse, hidden in the floorboards where I knew he would have left it. It is a map to the real archive, the one that contains the original sample of the virus and the counteragent. If we can get there first, we can destroy them both and render the committee powerless." Gabriel took the map, his hands shaking, and as he unfolded it, he saw a location marked deep underground in a military installation that had been decommissioned 30 years ago. The same installation where his father had worked before he became a journalist. The pieces were clicking into place, but the clock was ticking, and the professor's men were already closing in. In the distance, he heard the sound of helicopters, the same rotor wash that had filled the air at the lighthouse. Gabriel grabbed his mother's arm and pulled her toward the back exit of the facility, but she stopped him, her face a mask of determination. "No, Gabriel, we cannot both go. The professor's men will be here in minutes. One of us has to stay and buy the other time. I have been running for 20 years. I am tired, and I am ready to end this. You have the map. You have the tapes. You have the knowledge. You are the one who can finish what your father started. Go, and do not look back." Gabriel wanted to argue, wanted to drag her with him, but the desperation in her eyes was absolute. She shoved a small key into his palm, the key to the underground installation, and pushed him toward the exit. He stumbled into the darkness, his heart tearing in two, and as he ran into the forest, he heard the sound of boots behind him and the sharp crack of a gunshot. He did not stop. He could not stop. He ran through the trees, the map clutched in his hand, until he reached a ravine and slid down its slope, landing in a cold stream that washed the mud from his face. He lay there for a moment, gasping for breath, and then he forced himself to stand. The installation was 5 kilometers to the east, buried beneath a mountain. He had to get there before the professor's men found him, before the professor realized that his mother had sacrificed herself to give Gabriel the only thing that mattered: time.
Gabriel reached the installation entrance at dawn, a massive steel door set into the rock face, covered in vines and rust. He inserted the key his mother had given him, and the door slid open with a grind and groan, revealing a dark tunnel that descended into the earth. He walked for what felt like hours, his footsteps echoing in the void, until he reached a cavernous chamber filled with equipment from a bygone era. In the center of the chamber, encased in a glass cylinder, was a single vial of liquid, the original sample of the virus, and next to it, a second vial labeled counteragent. Gabriel approached the cylinder, his hand reaching out to touch the glass, when a voice from behind him stopped him cold. "I would not do that, Gabriel. The cylinder is rigged with a pressure sensor. If you break the glass, the virus will be released into the air, and everyone within 100 kilometers will be infected within minutes." Gabriel turned, and there stood the professor, not as the frail old man from the prison, but as his true self, a tall, commanding figure with cold, calculating eyes and a faint, knowing smile. "I have been waiting for you, Gabriel. I knew your mother would lead you here eventually. She was always predictable,
even when she was trying to be unpredictable. Gabriel's hands clenched into fists, but he knew that violence would not help. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice steady despite the terror coiling in his chest. The professor stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the vial. "I want what I have always wanted, the master sequence. But I do not need it to activate the virus, Gabriel. I need it to destroy it. You have been misled. The committee is not a group of faceless architects. They are the remnants of a government that collapsed 30 years ago. They have been using the threat of the virus to maintain control, but they have no intention of activating it. They are cowards, and cowards do not unleash weapons they cannot control. I want the master sequence to prove to the world that the virus is real, that the committee is real, and that they have been holding humanity hostage for decades. I am not the villain, Gabriel. I am the reckoning." Gabriel stared at the professor, the weight of his words pressing down like the mountain above them. Every villain had a justification, and this one was dangerously compelling. But Gabriel knew that the ends did not justify the means, especially when the means had already cost his father's life, his mother's freedom, and his own sanity. If you want the master sequence, then you are standing in the same room with the only two people who can create it. But I will not give it to you. I will destroy it, and I will destroy the sample, and I will end this nightmare once and for all. The professor's smile faded, and his hand moved to his holster. "I was afraid you would say that. I had hoped you would see reason, but you are your father's son in more ways than you know. Stubborn, righteous, and ultimately doomed." He drew his pistol, but before he could fire, the lights in the chamber flickered and died, plunging them into total darkness. In the confusion, Gabriel heard a scuffle, the sound of a body hitting the floor, and then his mother's voice, weak but defiant. "Run, Gabriel, run now." He did not hesitate. He grabbed the vial of counteragent, the only thing that mattered, and sprinted toward the exit, the sound of gunfire echoing behind him. He did not know if his mother had survived, did not know if the professor was still alive, but he knew that he had the weapon, the only weapon that could stop the committee. As he burst out into the morning light, the vial clutched to his chest. He made a decision. He would not destroy it. He would use it to expose the truth, to force the committee into the open, and to give humanity a fighting chance. But to do that, he needed to stay alive, and the professor's network was still hunting him. He ran into the forest, the vial warm against his skin, and behind him, the mountain installation erupted in a pillar of smoke and fire. The professor had triggered a self-destruct, and Gabriel knew that the war was far from over. It was only entering its deadliest phase.